Hi there. Today I would like to show you how to make this card with the stained glass effects. Now, I'm not a great artist at this, but what I can tell you is some things that are interesting about this is what type of dies work great for it. As you can see, the outlines are the part that are the die of this that makes the actual leading, if you want to talk about stained glass. Now, this die is a discontinued die, but it happens to be a great one because of several things. First of all, if you'll notice, the holes are very large in it, and it also has the outlines of the flowers, which is what I used in this card. Some dies do not work as well. Here's one example that I did with the box cover from the box Thinlits. And the problem with this die was it was very hard to get the glossy accents down in these holes. So you want to watch out and make sure your holes are large enough to get that glossy accents in there, if you can see that. This was very difficult. I decided I didn't like it, so I cut it out. Here's another set of dies that might work, and these are called Mayflowers. Probably another Stampin' Up! Discontinued die. But as you can see, the lines are there where the paper would be cut out, and then you'd have these holes. So what you're looking for is how large are those holes that I'm going to have to put some goo down in, the Glossy Accents or the Crystal Effects is Stampin' Up's brand. Here's the other one in this set, which the nice thing about this one is it has nice large holes for putting that in there. You do not want to use dies like this, which just cut out the outline, because as you know, there's no, once it cuts this out, this is the whole section now, so there's no line to make your leading with, if that makes any sense. So what I'd like to do is show you how to do this, and the materials that you will need to do this. First of all, you need the die shape. Second of all, you need some, I just used white 110-pound Neenah Exact Index for the layers. Now, when you have these intricate dies, it's a lot easier to put them together if you have something that puts adhesive on the back. I'm going to use Stick It, and that's what I'm going to do to put this on the back. So I'm going to cut this out, but first I want to put the Stick It on the back. Now, I happen to have the bigger sheets of Stick It. They're great big, but if on one side, as you'll notice, there's a crease there. So I really only need, when I think about it, this die, I really only need one section of that, because this die will actually fit on there just like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adhere my paper to this Stick It. So I'm going to peel off one sheet, and this is all adhesive right there. So what I'm going to do is put the paper right down on that adhesive. Now, if I don't get the very edge, it's probably fine. Yikes. And rub it down. And I'm going to do that with I'm going to do this with 3 sheets of paper. And that one got a little off, but we're not going to worry about it too much. I'm going to put this back on there so I can actually cut it, because the release paper will allow me to cut it without the scissors being all sticky. So I'm basically going to cut this off here, across there, and then I'm going to cut down where I actually put my paper. And I'm going to do this with 3 pieces. The great part about this is the fact that this adhesive will be all over the back side, and I'm going to cut the paper while the adhesive is on it with the release sheet. You want to really rub this down, because it's temporary until you rub it down for a bit. So, and I got a mess here, but I'm just going to leave that on there for right now, because I don't want to run that through my die cutting machine with goop on it. So I'm going to cut these apart. And I could be much neater about this, but obviously I'm not. So anyway, what you're going to do is you're going to put the die on this side, on the side that does not have the adhesive. So we're going to set the die down on there and run it through the Big Shot or whatever embossing machine you're going to do. Okay, and now one of the things about the Big Shot is, let me bring it over here and explain this to you. My cutting pads are pretty weird used. I have the magnetic platform in here from Stampin' Up, and I also have a metal shim. It's probably from Spellbinders, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the paper down. It's important to have this metal shim on your very detailed dies because it does hold it so that it'll get it all over the place. It'll cut the die evenly. So I'm going to put the die down on, now remember this is the part that is not sticky here. The sticky is on the other side. The stick-it's on the other side. And actually I'm going to turn this die around because as you can see, I missed a section here, getting the stick-it on there. And actually with this die, let me explain something here. It has this edge right here. I'm going to trim that off because I don't like the looks of it on the card. The first time I made the card, if I can show you, it's pretty thick in there when you put 3 or 4 layers of that. And so I wrapped some ribbon around it because I didn't like the looks of it. So what I'm going to do in this time, and I'm going to actually try to do it right, is I'm going to trim that off on my pieces and just leave a little tiny edge on there. So if you can get this in your die cutting machine, I could have taped it down, but well, my plates are warped. And now this will go through quite hard to go through there. And if you want, you can come back. It doesn't really matter with that metal plate in there. It works great. And as you can see, it cut it out cleanly. And if you look at the back of your die, you can see that everything has been cut really nicely with that in there. The stick-it actually is thin enough to do this with your fancy dies. There's some other products on the market that are not necessarily as thin as stick-it. So for this technique, I like the stick-it because it doesn't add the extra bulk. Because the card is bulky enough as it is once you get 3 pieces of this on there. So now, the easiest way to get this out of here is to put it on your foam and take your little tool here and just roll it over top of it to get all those little pieces out. Now if you do this on a piece of sticky paper, you can also use those for inlay cards if you want to do that. I don't want to bother with it right now, so I'm just going to take this out. Now the die is still in there and all the pieces are out, but now I need to get it out of there. So I'm going to take my little pokey tool here and try to get some of it out. Yeah, it'll poke right out. Okay. So there's the die. Now you're going to do this 3 or 4 times. I'm going to try 3 times because I felt that 4 times was a little too thick with this paper. It's not a heavy-duty cardstock. Like I said, it's only the Neenah Exact Index 110 pound, but it's thick enough for what I want. Okay, so I'm going to do this again and I'll be back. Okay, what I'm doing now is I'm going to explain to you why I'm doing this now, as I'm going to put the greeting down here. And the reason I am is, the reason I have this oval here is because I tried to match the silver embossing fluid by putting wedding wishes. I wanted this for a wedding card. However, my wedding wishes was a wood mounted stamp, and to get my stamp positioner in there exactly right, and I wasn't going to use the Stamparatus or the Misty on this, I tried to emboss it in silver, and of course with this bumpiness here already, it was not a good idea. So I'm going to try to put the greeting on first. I really wanted it to match the silver leading in the stained glass part, so I'm just going to position one of these here, and I have a different wedding stamp, of course, which is, so I basically just put this on there with Versamark after I put the anti-static. So now I just set that there so you can see where I was going to put it, and then I'm going to sprinkle silver embossing powder over top of that, and I'm using Stampin' Up's Sterling Silver, which is a really thick silver that I like. So I'm just going to do the greeting first. Now this is a piece of Bristol Smooth. I happen to like Bristol Smooth for the background of this stained glass for the front of the card, simply because it's going to warp and it's going to be wet and it's going to be thick. I need something thicker than your basic Neenah cardstock for the front of the card. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to heat set that and then I'll be back. Now, as I said, I didn't like this edge here. I think this die was meant to be folded around the edge of the card, and you could do that if you were just using one single piece. So I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut very close to the edge of that. Now, I might just move it in and put a little ribbon down the edge anyway, but I'm going to do that to all three pieces. And one of them, or a couple of them, don't have the sticky stuff on the back right there, which turned out fortuitous for that I didn't have to worry about that. So we're just going to trim those three down. So the edges are gone. So if I put this over a little bit, I still have room for the ribbon down the edge, but it won't be as bulky over there, which I kind of like. Okay. Now what you're going to do is you're going to just peel off that, stick it off the back, and let me get this up here so I can see what I'm doing. It really doesn't come off that difficult. It's just that when you have nail polish on and your nails are thicker, it doesn't work. There we go. Just got a little edge of it. Okay, so this peels right off nicely. So this is all adhesive here. And I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to place it right on the card where I want it, leaving enough room on the edge for that ribbon, and I want it straight, obviously. So I'm going to put this down, and actually that would be a very pretty wedding card right as it is. Okay, so one of the things that you can do is take the shiny side of your Stick-It and put this down and really rub it in. Now you can use a bone folder. I have a bone folder right here. Put that down so that it's really stuck. And it helps to use that shiny side of that paper because you won't rip your die cut. As I said, this is a thinner paper. It's not the real thick cardstock, okay? So the next thing is I'm going to color in all of these sections. And what am I going to use? But I'm going to use Stampin' Up's Blendabilities. I have a Daffodil Delight. I'm not sure if I'm going to use that because it was only on one spot in the card. But I have the Light and Dark Rich Razzleberry, and I have, this is Light Pink Pirouette. And I also have the two olives, the light and the dark. So I'm just going to color this in, and not anything fancy. You just want to stay, it doesn't matter if you go over top of these lines, so I'll color a little bit so you can see that. It doesn't matter because I'm going to cover them up. So I'm going to put the dark in the center, coming out. Just show you one flower here, how I did it. Okay, so there's the dark in the center of the flower, the dark Rich Razzleberry. Then I'm going to come back in with the medium. And I'm not being real fussy about this because this is going to, and so I'm going to blend this out. Notice I'm hitting the die cut, and it's okay. Just don't go outside of the outside lines on that die cut. Okay, and then finally the Pirouette Pink. That will blend nicely with the Razzleberry. If you really want to see an alternative method to this, You can go to Jennifer McGuire's website, which is, she has another method for doing this, and you might like her directions better. That's fine. Anyway, that's just how you color it. Now, like I said, it doesn't matter that you got on these little pieces of the die cut. Just don't go outside of the outside die cut. That's the really one you only have to be careful of. So I'm going to finish coloring this, and then I'll be back to put it together. Okay, now as you can see, that coloring does not look very good. But what happens is, once you put the next one, I've already removed the stick-it on the back of here, and I'm going to place it over here on the edge and line this up right over top. Now you can do this before you remove the stick-it if you want, just to make sure your coloring is exactly the way you want it, so you get it right on top of there and lay it down. And it actually looks pretty good without even doing the embossing on top. Again, I'm going to take the bone folder, and the piece of the shiny side of the stick-it is down, and I'm going to press this down in here so I make sure it sticks really well. And so then it looks a lot better. I did end up putting the yellow in there anyway. So our final piece is actually the piece that we're going to take and we're going to emboss. Now I did not remove the stick-it on this yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to emboss it. I'm going to lay it on the sticky side out with the on the stick-it shiny stuff, right? Maybe a piece of scrap paper underneath would help. Because what I'm going to do now is I want to cover this completely with embossing powder, and I'm going to use the silver, the sterling silver again. So I'm going to take the Versamark pad and I'm going to pat it over the whole thing. I did not put any release. I didn't hit it with the embossing buddy or anything. I'm just going to completely cover it with Versamark, and then sprinkle on the sterling silver. And I'm going to do this twice. So I'm going to heat set this once because it will be prettier if it's done twice. It'll look more like leaded. Now you could probably use the pewter if you wanted to use the pewter with this. I forgot my tweezers, but anyway. Lift that up and shake it off. So I'm going to heat set this and I'll be right back. So this is one layer of embossing powder on there, and this is again is the sterling silver, which makes it really thick. I like this embossing powder about the best for silver. It still has the stick-it on the back. It didn't seem to hurt it at all to heat it, which I was worried about that. Now, if you have any spots that did not get embossing powder, you can emboss it again. This one seems really good, so I'm going to go with it. So, but first, I think before I'm going to do that, I'm going to show you how we're going to make the stained glass on the card. So, let's get the card over here. So here's the card, and there's a couple different products you can use. Several companies make them. You can use Glossy Accents from Ranger. Stampin' Up! Makes one, and I haven't even opened this one yet. It's Crystal Effects. So I'm not going to open it. I'm just going to use the Glossy Accents because it's the same exact thing. They're going to dry completely clear. So I'm going to put the silver piece down. Remove the adhesive on the back. You can see me do this. Oh, I got it. Okay, so this is sticky. I'm going to again position this right over top of the other one. Getting the flower edges down because I know I'm going to put ribbon over here. So if anything goes off whack, off kilter over here, I'd rather have it be over here than over on the edge where the flowers are. So I want this completely down here. Again, I'm going to lay this paper down and run the bone folder over it. Now, I think you could put the glossy accents on first. I don't think it really matters, so I'm going to put the whole thing together just the way it is, and then I'm going to put the glossy accents on, or the crystal effects, whichever one you want to use. So I'm going to press that down, get it really good on the edges. Okay. Now, glossy accents. I have had these things dry up on me, so I always put a quilting pin in the end of it. And when you put that down with that ball, when you put this cover on, it actually presses it in there and keeps it open. And then I can use the pin, because the pin comes in handy when you're going to put this stuff in these holes. So what you're going to do is you're going to fill each of these holes with glossy accents. Just dump it in there. And what you want to do is you want to take your pin and you want to pull it over and make sure it touches the edges of each section. Okay? And when I'm going to fill this in, and then I'll be back. Okay, now that I've got these all filled in and I've gone through with the pin and I've made sure that they're up here touching. If there's any dull spots, you'll be able to see that because it won't be shiny, obviously. And if you need to add a little bit more, you can always add a little bit more into a little hole. Now, this is going to warp. One of the things that sometimes I do is I'll take it and I will slap it down on my surface to level out the glossy effects in there. Okay, so you have to let this dry. That's the hard part, right? You got to let it dry. You can't heat set it or anything like that to speed it up. Just let it dry because it will sink in. It'll adhere to the edges of these but sink down in. If you can see the finished card, you can see that it's sunk down inside those holes, and that's exactly what it will do. Okay, I'll be back and put the card together. Okay, so now this card is all dry, and you can see that it warped, which that's the problem with doing this type of a technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the back. I'm going to put this card together, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a lot of this double-sided tape on the back so that I get it there. I'm going to put it across here, and if I overlap the card, it's okay, because I can always, once I peel off the other side of that, we can I can roll it back across the card. So I'm going to put quite a bit across this area where it is buckling. And I have a piece of ribbon that's, I'd say it's 18 inches long. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take the center of it and I'm going to make a bow. Well, I'm going to do that with rabbit ears. I call them rabbit ears because you take two loops like this and then you tie them like you're tying your shoe together. I've done this before. It's really not a difficult bow, and the nice thing about this particular bow is it's adjustable. So I can adjust the ends by just holding onto the knot and pulling this in and then tightening it up, and then you get a perfect bow. So what I'm going to do is remove the adhesive just on that corner where I put these two little pieces, because I want to put the bow on first. So we'll remove this. I can get it off here. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to position my bow right where I want it on the front of the card. And I think I'm going to put it up a little higher than before. And then I'm going to wrap this edge right there, right where that adhesive is. Make sure the bow is really tight so it's stuck on the back, and then I'm going to pull it down here on the other side and stick it back here right against that strong adhesive. So if you have a little bit left over, you can trim it out, you can pull these out, and then you've got your bow on your card. So I'm going to trim those off because I forgot my scissors. So going to trim these because they don't need so much sticking on the back. And then I'm going to put another piece of adhesive right over those. I'm going to take the card base, which is 8.5 by 5.5 by 8.5, and I'm going to fold this in half. And I'll start by taking, I think I'm going to put a little bit more adhesive on those corners because I didn't get it quite long enough. So put a little here, just because I know those corners will probably try to lift up because the card is totally warped over there on that side. So now, take all these little pieces off. Someone asked me one time, what tool are you using? Well, I took a pottery class, and this was one of my pottery tools, but it's great because it's curved. It's a Royal D1. It's pointed on one end, which is really sharp, and curved on the other end, and it just slides right underneath the edge of this tape really nicely. So keep it up here where you can see it. This one didn't stick to the ribbon. Now see, I got a piece too long here. When this happens, just roll it over and set it against itself. It doesn't hurt a thing, and it doesn't make it too thick because this is very thin adhesive once it's on. So once we remove all these, this is a side folding card. I have the fold over here on the left, and I like to put my piece with a fold down first, and I bend the card just slightly. It's hard to do with this much thickness on it, but put that edge down on the fold and then let it fall. Oops. One little piece of adhesive sticking out before we flop it down. Okay, press it down really well, and that takes care of all of the warping. So that's the card. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.